Massard Road is an arterial roadway on the eastern end of Fort Smith, Arkansas, running from north to south, then turning southeasterly where it meets I-49 and terminates. This southeasterly portion has long been planned as a 4-lane arterial, and the city of Fort Smith has slowly built out that plan for several years. This video is part 2 of a series about the third phase of that widening project and why I'm against it and why you should be too. In the first video, we discussed traditional development patterns, and the next 3 videos in the series will cover 1. How widening Massard will make traffic worse, not better, this video. 2. How it will not add new wealth or tax revenue for the city. And 3. It will make Fort Smith lose its small town feel. So today's topic is traffic, congestion, and why widening Massard Road isn't the $14.5 million silver bullet we think it is. Let's begin with the city's own justification for widening Massard so we can spend the rest of the video with it in the back of our mind. First is the Future Fort Smith document, which was put out by a committee that draws up medium-term ideas for the city. This document is a guiding document with non-binding ideals and values that we hope to strive for as the city grows. On page 42 it says, as demand for trips along major roads increases, the road system will need to adapt to accommodate the needs of motorists. There's also the 2040 plan from Frontier MPO, which doesn't have much specific to say about the widening of Massard project, except that it's the least popular of all the projects we have planned until the year 2040. There's also a memo from our city's Director of Engineering, which reads, Massard Road, south of Zero Street, continues to see a significant increase in the traffic volume given the construction and growth in the area. Additionally, the continuation of I-49 north to I-40 is well underway with the construction of the Arkansas River Bridge ongoing. It is anticipated that this connection will dramatically increase the traffic flow in this area, and the connection of Massard Road with I-49 will become a major interchange serving the city. This project includes the construction of the additional 2 lanes along Massard Road to complete the 4-lane boulevard section extending to approximately Shirecrest Drive. It also includes widening of Massard Road between Shirecrest Drive and I-49 to a 5-lane street section and the installation of a traffic signal at the intersection of Massard Road and Chad Colley Boulevard. In both the Future Fort Smith document and the city's internal memo, the justification for widening Massard is to accommodate for more traffic. Section 1. Induce demand. Widening roadways to alleviate congestion is one of the most persistent transportation solutions that doesn't always work as intended. On the surface, it seems logical. More lanes means more space for more cars, which means less congestion. But looking back at decades of actual widening projects shows the opposite to be true. At best, roadway expansion increases vehicle miles traveled, and at worst, it increases congestion. This phenomenon is commonly referred to as induced demand or generated traffic. So what is induced demand? The Victoria Transport Policy Institute has an excellent document outlining the various forms of generated traffic and academic citations to back them up. The first and second types of generated traffic are shorter routes and longer routes. By making certain routes easier to drive, people will choose a new route even if that route is longer than the old one. This effect will create new bottlenecks and increase congestion. Let's take a hypothetical worker at ArcBest who has to commute home to this apartment complex at the end of Massard. They have 3 main routes available. The most common route out of ArcBest is on McClure Drive. From there, the employee can either turn right onto McClure and then left onto Massard where there is a light, or they can turn left onto McClure, where some of them choose to try to turn left onto Massard without a light. Widening Massard to 4 lanes, or 5 lanes as the case will be here, will make turning left here without a light much more difficult. So some of this traffic will divert itself to a longer but easier route. Some of the drivers will divert to the route using the light, increasing the congestion there, or they may take other longer routes through this neighborhood, increasing congestion there on roadways such as Custer Boulevard and Chad Colley. And without digressing too much, how will the city respond to that increased congestion? Probably by widening more roads. The third type of generated traffic is time change. Take our same hypothetical commuters from ArcBest. Some of these workers end their workdays early to beat traffic, or maybe some of them work late and justify it by saying, "At least the commute home will be easier if I work late." Increasing capacity on Massard will give more incentive for these people to leave at 5 o'clock. So instead of staggering that traffic throughout multiple hours, more people will commute at the typical rush hour, which increases peak travel demand. In other words, it increases congestion. The fourth type of generated traffic is mode shift. ArcBest is situated right on a multi-use trail, and some people who work there might commute by walking or bicycle at least some of the time. These people see an advantage to walking or cycling for personal reasons that we can only speculate on, but making it easier to drive versus riding a bike might just tip the scale in favor of driving more. So when Massard is widened, a portion of this bicycle traffic will become more car traffic on Massard. This increases congestion. Fifth is destination change with existing land use. What this means is that someone will change their route or their destination based on some factor of the new road that doesn't have to do with distance. That might mean that the new road is just prettier or it's less stressful for some reason. But given two options, the driver who previously chose option 1 now chooses option 2, which might come with different traffic impacts. Someone might live at this apartment complex, so they go to the Walmart on Rogers for their groceries. But if Massard is widened to make it easier to get to this Walmart on Zero, they might change their route for groceries at least some of the time and add new traffic to Massard. This also leads to increased traffic for all of the other new routes that they might take throughout the city as a whole. The sixth type of generated traffic is destination change with land use change. This means that widening Massard will change the way that land is used on the southeast side of town. The city says they want to widen Massard to accommodate all the growth on the southeast side of town. But have you considered if the opposite is true? Maybe the growth is being caused by the new roads, not the new roads responding to growth. In other words, we're not accommodating growth on the southeast side of town, we're creating it with new roads. This new infrastructure raises demand for housing. And when that gets built, the demand for industrial and retail is created as well. Due to the proximity of Massard Road to the city's periphery, this also means some of this demand that we're artificially creating isn't in Fort Smith at all. It's in Alma or Greenwood or even Van Buren. We're spending Fort Smith tax dollars to increase real estate values in other cities. Widening Massard allows people to build new homes further away from their jobs in Fort Smith, which means they're driving longer distances to get to work, which means more traffic. Seventh is new trip, no land use changes. This means adding on additional trips that you may have consolidated or delayed previously. You might currently run 4 errands on one car trip. But widening Massard could encourage you to take 4 separate trips for 4 separate errands, meaning you run over the same stretch of road 4 times as much. That's an increase in traffic. And finally is 8th, automobile dependency. This is the amalgamation of all of the above effects happening at the same time, reinforcing each other. As you dedicate more resources to driving, it takes away just as much, if not more resources away from other modalities. This is why mass transit fails to catch on in cities with modern development patterns. It's why walking and cycling are not feasible methods of transportation. Expansion projects lead to increased reliance on automobiles and exacerbate overall traffic congestion. The result is not just more traffic on the widened road, but more cars on all city streets, greater road maintenance costs, and increased air pollution due to the additional miles traveled. These 8 forms of generated traffic have been umbrellaed under the nomenclature induced demand, which has become somewhat of a standout topic in pop science and on YouTube. but it's indisputably true according to actual academic research. Robert Cervero is one of the most prominent researchers to publish information about this. In his 2010 study, Road Expansion, Urban Growth, and Induced Travel, a Path Analysis, Cervero writes in the abstract that he confirms the presence of induced travel in both the short and longer run. This research also reveals significant induced growth and induced investment effects. Real estate development gravitates to improved freeways, and traffic increases spawn road investments over time. And in Induced Travel Demand and Induced Road Investment, he wrote in the abstract that his research, quote, found strong reciprocal relationships between road investments and travel demand. But can't we just build until there are enough lane miles for everyone to drive everywhere without any congestion? No, not really. There's not enough space to accommodate all that latent demand. You could pave over the entirety of your city limits with highways, and it still wouldn't be enough to keep up with all of the latent demand for traffic. We can all drive some of the time, but if we all drive all the time, no one moves at all. As Anthony Downs wrote all the way back in a 1962 article in Traffic Quarterly, in pure theory, only a road or system of roads wide enough to carry every commuter simultaneously at an optimal speed would be sufficient to eliminate all peak hour congestions. It is obvious that no such roads are practical unless we convert our metropolitan areas into giant cement slabs. And just to keep it local, here's what our own former director of RDOT has to say on the subject of induced demand. One might assume that an expected annual compounded traffic increase of 3 or 4% might be applied to the present traffic and thus arrive at a logical and satisfactory answer for 20 years from now. To follow such a procedure is the height of folly. Much has been learned of induced traffic on modern thoroughfares, and much remains to be learned. There are hundreds of other resources on the topic of induced demand, but they all tend to agree, even the ones that argue in favor of roadway widenings, that if you're widening a roadway to increase capacity, you better not be doing it under the guise of reducing congestion. And indeed, the City of Fort Smith's memo is carefully worded not to mention congestion. It vaguely mentions accommodating a hypothetical increase in traffic, but does not mention that that new traffic is being created by the widened roadway itself. Congestion won't get any better when they widen Massard, it will get worse. Section 2. The role of road hierarchy in concentrating traffic. Another reason why congestion gets worse from increased capacity is due to something called road hierarchy. Our network configuration in Fort Smith relies on a hierarchical road system where local streets funnel traffic into collector roads and then collector roads funnel vehicles into arterials. Some people liken it to the way a drop of water falls into a stream, that stream feeds into a creek, and that creek feeds into a river. This is basic hydrology. But what is also taught in basic hydrology is that rivers flood by nature. If we treat our network configuration like cars are liquid, they will flood like liquids. Road hierarchy is intended to organize traffic efficiently, but one of its downsides is that it also creates bottlenecks by concentrating large volumes of vehicles into a small space. Instead of diverting traffic equally throughout the city, all traffic goes to the same places. This is why to drive anywhere further than 10 or 15 minutes away in Fort Smith, you probably have to take one of our arterials: Midland, Grand, Rogers, Towson, Phoenix, and Zero. And if Massard is widened, it will naturally become the new preferred route for more drivers, concentrating congestion in that corridor as well. However, this does not mean that widening Massard will alleviate traffic on those other roads. Building a new route doesn't simply take away the latent demand from those existing routes. The new capacity simply spawns new car trips rather than redistributing old ones. As discussed in the abstract of Durant and Turner's The Fundamental Law of Road Congestion Evidence from U.S. Cities, increasing lane kilometers for one type of road diverts little traffic from other types of road. In other words, widening Massard will make traffic worse on Massard, and it also won't help traffic on other roads in Fort Smith. As Chuck Marone writes in Confessions of a Recovering Engineer, At the time of greatest need, during a period of maximum congestion, hierarchical road networks only use a tiny fraction of their overall capacity. The highway or major arterial may be flooded and in desperate need of relief, but simultaneously, the miles and miles of local and collector streets are practically empty, providing no relief but instead continuing to accentuate the flood. Section 3. The inefficiency of additional lanes. Another factor that limits the effectiveness of road widening is the inefficiency introduced by vehicles making lane changes. Widening Massard will double its size, but its capacity won't double. The first 2 lanes of a roadway are always the most cost-effective, and as you build more, they produce diminishing returns on investment each time. This is due to disruptions caused by merging and lane switching behavior. When drivers have the opportunity to change lanes, they create turbulence in traffic flow, forcing other vehicles to slow down and reducing overall efficiency. In Effects of the Number of Lanes on Highway Capacity, these researchers found, quote, average capacity per lane decreases significantly as the number of lanes increases. The increase of lane changing activity and its associated disturbance to traffic stream is the principal factor of the decrease of average capacity per lane on highways. In this other paper, whose title I don't even know how to pronounce, Sala and Soriguera summarized a number of other studies with similar conclusions. On the one hand, lane changing activity has been found to cause capacity reductions near bottlenecks in different scenarios. Patire and Cassidy observed a significant flow reduction after a lane changing increase due to speed variations between lanes. The massive lane changing happening at speed drops generates traffic disturbances which end up in generalized queuing on all lanes. The negative effects of lane changing are not limited to being a main capacity drop contributor. Also, they trigger traffic oscillations and stop-and-go waves. Moreover, lane changes are found to globally increase delay, as the time saved in the exiting lane is smaller than the induced delay in the arriving lane.
I know some of these words.
Widening Massard will make traffic worse by introducing more lane-changing conflicts, which could negate much of the perceived benefit of additional lanes. Each new additional lane is less bang for your buck. Section 4. The new old-fashioned way to manage traffic. So what's the solution then, Andy? Not have any roads at all? Leave Massard as a 2-lane road forever? No, of course not. Roadways need to be taken seriously, and decisions about them should be made both empirically and democratically. Is Massard being widened on an empirical, data-driven approach? Do we know what the rate of return will be for this $14.5 million investment? I fear that we do not. We're building this road out because someone drew it this way on a map 20 or 30 years ago. A data-driven approach would be one based on market forces, not top-down planning. Has the Chamber of Commerce offered to help fund Widening Massard? Have any real estate developers offered to help fund it? If we're widening a highway to supposedly encourage growth, then those who stand to gain the most from that growth would be offering to help pay for it. But they're not, because the demand for growth in this area is overstated. The market will let us know when it's time to expand Massard. Until then, any widening project is just a gamble.
A day may come
To widen Massard Road.
when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day. This day we fight!
Rather than using traffic models to anticipate growth, then pray for that growth to happen the way that we gambled on, we should listen to actual feedback in the present and build as the market demands. As Chuck Marohn says, the goal of traffic modeling is not to be right, it's to create a plausible narrative as to why more construction is both needed and helpful. A more effective approach to traffic congestion involves reducing car dependency rather than accommodating more vehicles. Cities that prioritize ways to build housing near amenities, prioritize complete street designs, prioritize finding ways to shorten commute distances, not commute times, we'll see more sustainable and long-lasting improvements in congestion. As Marone writes, building more capacity is a fruitless endeavor. The only way to deal with congestion is to allow congestion to drive demand. Auto trips need to be retained near where they originate or transformed into non-auto trips to prevent them from accumulating and flowing further downstream. That means building more corner stores and neighborhood businesses. Local leaders should never deny a new apartment building or a new neighborhood restaurant because they might increase traffic congestion. It is traffic congestion that requires us to build more and more local destinations. That's it for part 2 in why widening Massard will make traffic worse. Stay tuned for part 3 where we'll discuss how roadway projects are a way of redistributing wealth, and part 4 we'll discuss how widening Massard will take away from the small town feel of Fort Smith. Thanks everybody.